Just let me know when you guys are ready. Cool. Everybody good? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. We have a number of organizations that are represented here to talk to you about the completion of testing the rape kit backlog and the collaboration that it took to meet this to the end. Additionally, they'll be providing you details on the current status of the project and the next steps for survivors. And once everyone's finished speaking, then we'll open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to welcome Mayor Tim Keller.
Well, thanks so much, and good afternoon. So we are here for, I think, just a very, it's a difficult celebration. So I don't know how else to sort of phrase it because of what all of this means. But I also know, at least for our advocates and our staff, that the work that has been put in to finally end the rape kit backlog has been a tremendous effort, and by that measure is a tremendous success. Obviously, success when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault is a whole different question. But it's also important to celebrate victories along the way. And I think this is a very good example of just one of those. And also, in many ways, highlights so much more that we have to do. Now, this project was really years in the making. And I think there's very few situations when even me personally, have been so directly involved in a project. And just by way of background, to take us back to former life when I was the state auditor of New Mexico, and we had a government, I don't even remember her title, government accountability officer and general counsel named Sarita Nair. And this is where we really got involved right in the issue of the rape kit backlog. And for us, it began by, first and foremost, sort of acknowledging and understanding what's going on. And we have a fairly long run of show today, but it's for a good reason, because there's a lot of information we want to convey, and I think there's some important stories that we need to tell. And I want to tell one story of my own personal ignorance. I learned about this issue actually from Megan Kamerick. Some of you might know who that is, member of the media corps. So shout outs to Megan. She approached me when I was a young state senator, I think my second year, and she said, "What are you doing about the rape kit backlog?" And my first question was, "What's a rape kit?" And because if you don't know, it's also kind of a confusing term. So she taught me a little bit about what was happening then, and then of course I ended up meeting my future mother-in-law, who was on the board of SANE, Sydney Kiston, and now mother-in-law. So I learned about it again through that process, because when I first met her, actually one of the things that we talked about was her work on SANE, and I talked about how I had learned about sort of the rape kit backlog issue. And then you carry that forward to the auditor's office, when there was still a lot of advocacy going on with the advocates that are off to my right, and we were trying to find a way to help. And this is also where our GAO at the time, Sarita, mentioned, hey, what can we do about the rape kit backlog? And sort of incidentally, I had an indirect contact with the Kentucky auditor at the time. I have no idea if they're still auditor or not, but we met at a conference, and I said, what did you do to help with the rape kit backlog? And I do want to just give them credit. They kind of mapped out how Kentucky had gone through an audit through the state auditor's office. It wasn't as comprehensive or as aggressive as ours, but that provided a path forward to actually do something about this. And so we quickly took action, and so we used the various powers of the auditor's office to literally drive all around the state to every department looking at these, right, and making sure that we had an accurate count of untested rape kits. And so that process was one. The auditor's office is so small, by the way. I used to go to help count, like literally, because we didn't have that many people to go count. And so we visited, and even with the advocates, I think Las Cruces together and a couple of other, Espanola sticks out of my mind. Actually, Farmington sticks out of my mind, frankly, because they were way ahead of Albuquerque at the time, and they were in many ways a role model. And so for us, of course, we found that there were over 5,000 untested kits in New Mexico, and per capita, that was one of the highest in the country. And then we also found out that 75% of them were right here in this building. in our APD and Bernalillo County shared crime lab. We also found out that some of them dated back to the 1980s, over 40 years ago. And of course, unfortunately, many of them involve minors. Now, our audit concluded really with a couple of explanations for why the backlog occurred, and I think those are also important to share. The first was, as just a general concept, people were not believing victims. And you obviously have to do the investigative work and the testing after that. But initially, you've got to try and take victims at their word. That was sort of one key finding. I think the other one, which is extremely unfortunate too, is just often that these are associated family members. And so especially in different communities around our state, these became mixed in various family disputes or desires, for the family to kind of close ranks and not talk about it and so forth. So that's another very difficult issue that touches on a lot of issues with respect to our families, but nonetheless was a main driver of untested rape kits. Now, we believe that as a matter of public safety, we absolutely had to process all of these kits. And it also was an example of when you can make a difference, literally just doing it and not getting hung up on, oh, this takes an extra $200,000, or yeah, we need to outsource some of the testing to another state. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We figured out for not a lot of extra funds and for just rewriting some contracts, we could actually get all these tested in a couple of years, and that's exactly what we've done. Now, we have some pictures behind me. This is when I was literally standing in this hallway with many of you, actually, when we were doing our count, and we said the biggest problem was Albuquerque. And then we have, the empty shelves now resulting. And so this for us is, obviously, it's a symbolic picture, right? Every one of those boxes is a victim, and every one of those boxes tells a story that ultimately should lead to justice. And so that's really what these two pictures are about. Now, as a little bit of history on how we got this done, we sent out about 40 kits per month for testing when I came into office, and we ramped that up to basically 250. And so the rest was just math and time to get everything processed. I remember it was during COVID when we sent the last one out, and so it was in the heart of COVID, and I was with, one of our key staffers taping up the last box as it went out during COVID, and almost no one really noticed that. And that's okay, other than the fact that now we want to make sure that this message gets out, and hopefully it inspires other backlogs around the country, other people who are in charge of those backlogs, to push forward and end them in short order. So this is a huge step in the right direction, and remember why we're doing this. You get them tested, the kits and the evidence, and then that's matched across the CODIS database, and that's how it helps us put better cases for especially individuals who've been likely parts of multiple abuses, which is often common. It's often across state lines and county lines and so forth. That's why this CODIS database is so important. And obviously it really is effective in court when it comes to prosecution. And so I do want to give you a little bit of a picture sort of going forward around some of the other related issues, and then we're going to hand it over to the experts who've been involved in this since our administration took over. I want to remind everyone that we spent about $250,000 of federal funds last year to help this process occur and to support sexual assault nonprofit organizations affected by COVID. I also want to appreciate the DA's office and their work with us on all of these efforts. Obviously, they have sort of now a harder, time-consuming part with respect to prosecution, but no doubt we were able to help in our piece of that sort of chain of justice and work together with them on this. Now, there were 13 local nonprofits that received funding with respect to that $250,000 during COVID. And a lot of these nonprofits do advocacy, they do therapeutic services, they do case management for survivors. And last month, of course, too, our Mayor's Domestic Violence Prevention Task Force submitted recommendations for review to the administration. And we did discuss this publicly earlier, but there were really good recommendations in there. And that brought together individuals from the domestic violence prevention agencies, also from CYFD, Bernalillo County, City Council, Community Services, and our Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights. So that task force continues its work on all the other aspects of dealing with sexual assault in central New Mexico. So the city's already implementing some of these recommendations, and we're providing things like transit vouchers to local organizations and other items that we could do sort of in short order, and we're continuing to work on those long-term items. Also tucked in the funding that we sent down to council is a DVSAR position. I know I'm looking at the advocates. We think that's very important. So hopefully council will sign off on that, and we'll be able to implement that this summer. Now, we know that every survivor matters, and we cannot allow this backlog, a backlog like this, to ever happen again. And I am grateful to have so many partners and a department that is with us every step of this to make sure that we do not have any abnormal backlogs. Of course, there's always some for a month or so that can pile up. But we believe that we have the right process in place, the right advocates in place, and the right systems in place to make sure that such a horrendous backlog does not happen again. And part of that is because we have a strong chief of police who cares very much about this issue, and we're grateful to have him at the helm, and I'm going to hand it over to Chief Harold Medina. But before I go to Harold, we're going to hand it to Harold's boss, the CAO of the city, and the woman who drove this from the inside at the auditor's office and at the city of Albuquerque, our CAO, Sarita Nair.
Thanks, everybody. I just want to also start out with some words of appreciation. We have some folks here today who were with us throughout the rape kit audit. Connie Monahan was with the Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs. The Rape Crisis Center folks are here. Gail from SANE and her predecessor Teresa was really involved in this. I also want to acknowledge that when we did this audit, it did have two parts, right? There was a backlog at the state of about 1,500 and at the city of 3,500. The former DPS, the Department of Public Safety Secretary Scott Weaver, by the end of the audit, not at the beginning of the audit, but by the end of the audit, was really a believer in this cause and got all of the statewide kits tested through the state labs. So there's not only no longer a backlog in Albuquerque, but there's no longer a backlog in New Mexico, and I really want to acknowledge that leadership at the state level as well. Also, within our APD, there are a lot of folks who have been working on this. Of course, our detectives and those folks who work in the crimes against children and sex crimes units. But also, we have victims advocates. We got a lot of federal funding, and our grants coordinator, Maria Garcia Cunningham, was at the center of that, all the way to Graham, our handsomest member of our team there, who is our emotional support dog for folks who are going through this process. So a lot of people were involved in getting us here to this day. And then at the DA's office. And so when we first talked about this, we talked about it sort of like a snake eating a mouse, and it kind of started in the labs and then it moves through the police departments. And now that mouse is at that part of the snake that is the DA's office. And they have an actual dedicated unit, federally funded in part, led by a woman named Lee Hood, who is a tremendous advocate. And she has done a great job in assembling a team that is prosecuting these cases. And they are working really hard, and it's really difficult work to sometimes call a victim who hasn't thought about it or has tried not to think about it for years and ask them if they want to engage in this process and then shepherd them through it. And so they're doing really, really great work over there. Also want to let anybody who's watching who has a sexual assault evidence kit that was in the backlog know that the best way to find the status of that kit is by calling the SAIL hotline. So that's SAIL, like a sailboat. The number is 1-866-613-7245. So that is the SAIL hotline, 866-613-7245. And they will continue to track the status, I believe, even all the way through prosecution of that case, or if there's a decision not to move forward or if there was no usable evidence. So if you have a question about your kit, that's the number to call. So the other item I wanted to touch on here was this issue about how we work specifically in the police department and in the city with survivors of sexual assault. When we went through the audit, one of the things that we learned was that trauma-informed forensic experiential interviews and having that skill set among our detectives and our folks who work with survivors was really, really important. And we put that as one of the recommendations in the report. And then when we moved over to the city, started to work towards getting that accomplished within APD. And of course, everybody in APD was very supportive. And it sort of hit a pause during the pandemic, but I'm happy to say that the forensic experiential trauma interview, the folks who provide that training were able to develop an online platform in mid-2020. We got funding secured for spots in October of 2020, and a large portion of the special victims section of APD, which includes sex crimes, crimes against children, and child exploitation, have attended the on-course online. We've also sent some of our homicide detectives to that course, and so we know that that was a really important recommendation, and I'm really pleased to report that we were able to move forward from it. November 2020 marked sort of the end of that effort, and we're beginning to see the results in really much more productive and healthy interactions with those folks that we have to follow up with. So I'm going to turn it back over to our MC, Rebecca, but I just want to thank you all for being here today, and just, you know, we're going to keep talking about this until there's actually justice for survivors, because it wasn't over when we sent the last kit, it wasn't over when we get the last kit back. It will only be over when we've really worked to bring to justice everyone who caused one of these kits to happen in the first place. Thanks.
Alrighty, thank you, CAO Nair. And next up, we have Chief of Police Harold Medina.
Thank you for being here this afternoon as we talk about a difficult subject about victims having to wait so long to get justice. I'm proud to stand before you knowing we have cleared the rape kit backlog. Making survivors of sexual assault wait decades to even have their kits tested, let alone see justice in their case, is a disservice to every one of these victims. We cannot and will not let this happen again, and that's why we're moving forward from this, focusing now on the solid police work and solving these cases and bringing forth charges when we're able to. There are many factors and reasons that led to the backlog, from insufficient funding for the lab and the employees, not having the appropriate technology and tracking system, and a history of only testing kits as requested by the District Attorney's Office. We now have the funding we need, more staffing, and processes in place to stay ahead of getting another backlog. We also are making sure rape kits are processed within 90 days, another part of our plan to avoid any future backlogs. When survivors of sexual assault make the decision to seek help and submit a rape kit, it is our obligation to do everything we can to assist them through the process and ensure that they have swift justice. I'll now send it over to Krista Stone, our Evidence Division Manager. Christy?
Hello, my name is Christy Stone. I'm the lab manager over the DNA, chemistry, firearms, latent fingerprint, and NIMDIS units at the Albuquerque Police Department since September of 2020. In 2017, an audit was conducted to establish the number of sexual assault evidence kits, also referred to as SAKEs, that have not been tested. The audit resulted in identifying 4,742 APD SAKEs that were in need of testing. Utilizing grant funding, the backlog cases were outsourced to government and private laboratories that met all accreditation and agency standards to assist in this project. As of today, all SAKEs have been tested, and the DNA unit has reviewed all but approximately 130 of these cases to determine eligibility for the entry of the Combined DNA Index System, also known as CODIS. This database houses offender DNA profiles and evidence profiles from across the country. CODIS eligibility reviews are done by DNA analysts to establish that the profiles generated are reasonably determined to be that of the suspect within the case, so that innocent persons' DNA profiles are not entered errantly into the system. Reviews are ongoing, and we anticipate completing them by July 1st. Of the reviewed cases, 3,152 DNA profiles were generated, and 1,318 of these were determined by the laboratory to be CODIS eligible and subsequently entered into the CODIS database. As of today, there have been 518 CODIS hits, accounting for 47% of the profiles entered within the scope of this project. A CODIS hit indicates that the database has identified an offender in the system with the same DNA profile as one generated from casework, or that the profile generated in the case matched to that of another unsolved case. These hits have been verified through agency and FBI standards, and the results passed on to our detectives in the APD Sex Crimes Unit and BCSO Special Victims Unit. Since 2018, utilizing guidance from City Council, all state cases are completed within 90 days. The DNA unit works with our partners at SANE and APD Sex Crimes to coordinate all new evidence as it's collected so that it can be received, evaluated, and tested at the laboratory. Since October of 2018, 525 SAKEs have been submitted to the laboratory for analysis. 64 SAKEs were sent to a private laboratory for testing, and the remaining were worked in-house with 26 kits currently in progress. On average, our DNA analysts complete cases in 40 days, and there's currently no backlog of sexual assault kits. The DNA unit has increased its number of personnel, introduced robotics, and has more technology coming online this fall that will assist in increasing productivity. These forensic scientists have worked diligently to complete the backlog project in 3.5 years, while also keeping up with incoming kits to prevent another backlog and give investigators information they need to support the citizens of Albuquerque.
All right, next up we have Lieutenant Nicholas Sanders with the Special Victims Unit at APD.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicholas Sanders, and I run the Special Victims Section, and part of the Special Victims Section is our Sex Crimes Unit. Those are the detectives and the supervisors and the support staff that are being tasked with this backlog to cover all the issues with reaching out to our victims to ensure that they're not continue to be not heard, that they can get a voice to justice, and to try to get our cases prosecuted. We're very aware at the Albuquerque Police Department and Acute 2 that this was a disservice that happened. And we've taken a lot of steps to go forward to correct those disservices, and also a lot of steps to go forward to adhere to the traumatization that these victims experienced, but also are experiencing because they're not seeing that prosecution. We have a great support staff of advocates that continuously reach out to our victims. We have a great support staff that continuously reevaluates these cases to see if we have offenders that are crossing other jurisdictions or that are crossing with other victims to continue to go forward as quickly as we possibly can with prosecutions. We've developed great communication with the District Attorney's Office to ensure that the communication flows evenly and quickly, so not only that we're recognizing serial issues or other concerns, but the issues that they recognize through other case files or other crimes that they also prosecute that do not come through the special victim sections, that they can notify us of possible offenders that are linked to our cases. So the building of the bridges have been great since I've been there. The support staff that is there, with Valerie Lucero here today, Amanda Wild as the sergeant running the team, has just been amazing. We are striving to go forward as best as we can to ensure that justice is served. We're doing our absolute best to ensure that no future backlogs happen, and I am grateful to say that also our partners across the hall at the Family Advocacy Center with the rape crisis, the SANE unit, have just been amazing as far as continuing to provide flow of information and support. I appreciate everybody being here today.
All right, next up we have Gail Starr. She's the clinical coordinator for ABQ SANE.
Hello, thank you all for letting me come and speak on this subject. Hi, my name is Gail. As she said, I am the clinical coordinator for Albuquerque SANE. SANE stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner. We are the nurses that do the exams on these patients. We see victims of sexual assault, child sexual abuse, and domestic violence as well. So we do the medical exams that actually collect these kids. And I remember I was a SANE for about 3 years when I realized I was lying to my patients. I was telling them it didn't matter who assaulted them, if they knew their name or not, but that they would get their kit processed. And I realized, no, that was a lie. I was really upset. And I remember every kit after I put in that, I'm like, there's another one for the black hole. So what we did at SANE was to redouble our efforts towards the medical care and the support of the patients and working with our advocate friends and working with APD, but to support the patients at where they are. They're at an incredibly vulnerable spot when they're seeing us. They've experienced one of the worst days of their life, so we wanted to support them. Now, I remember when Auditor Keller and Sarita came to our office and started counting those kits, and it was a glimmer of hope. Now we can make the promise. Now I get to tell my patient it doesn't matter. These kits will be tested within 90 days, and we can't promise that we're going to find DNA or that they're going to find DNA. I don't find it. But we promise that they will be processed. So we are able to do that, and that, I tell you, feels so good. So thank you for that. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you, and thank you for putting this attention on this, and it really means the world to us at this process. Thank you.
All right, next up we have Jody Jaramillo. She's the Crisis Service Director at the Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm Jody Jaramillo. I'm the Director of Crisis Services over at the Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico. First and foremost, I want to thank Mayor Tim Keller and many others here today for addressing the sexual assault kit backlog. It was the leadership, determination, dedication, and courage of many members of law enforcement, elected lawmakers, tireless advocates, and fearless survivors that made this all possible. I would also like to take the time to thank the City of Albuquerque, the Albuquerque Police Department, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, the Second Judicial District Attorney's Office, the Crime Lab, the New Mexico Attorney General's Office, and the Albuquerque Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners for working with the Rape Crisis Center to implement the Sexual Assault Response Team, also known as SART. Our monthly meetings are designed to provide a safety net to ensure survivors' cases do not fall through the cracks and go unnoticed. I am so filled with gratitude for the commitment to survivors that has been announced today. Testing rape kits sends a fundamental and crucial message to survivors of sexual violence. You matter, what happened to you matters, your case matters. Now more than ever, we need to continue to stand vigilantly with survivors and do everything in our power to continue to guarantee them justice, equality, and all the civil rights that belong to the people of New Mexico. Because sexual violence is an ongoing issue, the end of Sexual Assault Awareness Month does not mean that we stop these difficult conversations. We need to continue to spread awareness and education about sexual violence in our community. The motto for Sexual Assault Awareness Month is "Together we heal." Nothing has embodied that spirit more than the collaboration of all these agencies and the community to end the rape kit backlog. If you or anyone you know have been affected by sexual violence and you need help, please call our 24-hour hotline. It's 505-266-7711. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and our last speaker today is Melanie Stansbury, State Representative.
Good afternoon. I am State House Representative Melanie Stansbury, and I am so incredibly grateful and honored to be here today. Today is about justice, about seeking justice for survivors, many of whom have waited for years for justice in our system. I want to thank the Mayor, Chief Medina, our amazing organizations and partners who have been advocating for survivors for years, to Sarita and the many, many others who have worked for this day to ensure that we were addressing this backlog. Part of why I am here today is to talk about the work that myself and other state legislators did to help bring resources to address this issue. For many years, this rape kit backlog was due to a lack of coordination and leadership and resources being available to address these issues. So myself and other House and Senate members of our legislature worked together under the leadership of the city to bring coordinated capital outlay to help bring additional resources for this very facility and to ensure that we have the modern equipment to fight crime, to bring justice, and ensure that we are bringing safety to our communities. I want to thank everyone for their leadership. I want to thank our community leaders for working on this issue and the bravery of survivors who've come forward. And with that, I just want to say the fight for justice continues, and thank you so much to our mayor and to everyone for coming out this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, now we can open it up for Q&A. Does anybody have questions? Sure.
I have a question. I don't know who to direct this to, but
Sure.
I heard you mention that the actual backlog was cleared sometime during COVID. Can you say when it was actually officially cleared? And then just to clarify, it was 3,500 kits at this facility and then 1,000 statewide. So was that all cleared at the same time, or?
Yeah, I'm going to get Christy up here.
Okay. I'll take a shot at it, and then Christy's really the expert on this, or Commander. So, we really finished the end of March is the answer to your question. The last box, I have to really think about when we sent that out, but I know it was in heavy quarantine, so that might have been maybe 6 months before that, and then we got it back. We do want to be clear, everything we're sharing with you is only about Albuquerque's backlog. So all the state questions and so forth, remember there are, off the top of my head, 90 different entities. There might have been over 100 slightly that actually, have these in different, whether it's county or, sometimes different other police departments and so forth. So this is just about Bernalillo County, Albuquerque backlog.
And then that number, just to clarify, that number for Albuquerque, Bernalillo County was 3,500, not 5,000, right? Because it was 5,000 statewide?
Correct, yeah, 75% were Albuquerque. This facility is joint Albuquerque-Bernalillo County. Yeah.
Does anyone else have questions?
One on Zoom. Sorry, in person from Matt Risen. How many cases have been referred for prosecution and how many people have been charged?
So as far as prosecution, we'll have to defer that to the district attorney's office.
Yeah, the district attorney's office would be the best point to get that type of information. We consistently send cases over for prosecution, but depending upon how they want to proceed is where the number would lie.
Does anyone else have questions?
And can you tell us how much has been spent for the entire endeavor, at least for the administration?
Well,
We can get it.
yeah, we'll get it for you afterwards.
And Mayor, just to be clear, March, when you were talking, is that this March or 2020?
2020.
2020, yeah.
Alrighty, well, thank you all for being here.